from UC Berkeley MSA, Muslim Student Association, and today we'll be talking about everything related to the college application process. So anything from filling out the application to financial aid and choosing the right school, it'll all be covered. So to start off, we'll just introduce ourselves. So my name is Zaid. I'm the Youth Outreach Head for UC Berkeley MSA.
My name is Yusra. I'm first year at Berkeley and I'm also part of the Youth Outreach team.
I'm Kazi. I'm a second year at Berkeley. I'm the head of the Dawah committee.
I'm Farah. I'm a senior at Berkeley. I'm also part of the Youth Outreach committee.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so the most important part of the college application process is choosing the right school. Now, if you're a senior and you're applying this year, the application is 15 days away from when it should be submitted, so it might be a bit late. But if you're a junior or sophomore or even a freshman, this is the time where you should begin, thinking about the school you want to go to. So a good formula for deciding where you want to apply to is that you should have 2 reach schools tailored for you, 3 safety schools, and 3 to 7 match schools. So what that means is that 2 schools should be in a range where your stats, like your ACT score, SAT score, GPA, might be a little bit below what they're usually looking for, but that's okay because these are reach schools that you're thinking as, these are competitive schools, maybe you may get into them, you may not. And then you should have 3 safety schools, once again tailored for you. Safety schools are schools which you're pretty sure you can get into, 90% chance you're going to get in. So, for example, a safety school for someone might be community college, or they might be a school where your statistics, like your GPA, SAT score, are considerably above the average SAT score or GPA for that school. And then you should have 3 to 7 match schools. Match schools are any schools or colleges that fall within your stats. So if your ACT score is a bit above or around the same as the average for that school, that's a pretty good indication that that school is a match for you. Now the exception for that is any sort of competitive school. So if you have a really good SAT score or GPA, so for example if you have a 3.9 GPA and a 1500 SAT score, schools you're looking at which have the same average stats might actually be reaches. So for example, UC Berkeley might have an average of 1490 for the SAT, and you have that, but the acceptance rate for UC Berkeley is actually pretty low. So that's probably more of a reach school than a match school. And one important thing to remember is that the schools you select should be tailored to your interests. So if you want to be for example, a computer science major, you should apply to schools which have strong computer science programs where you know that they can prepare you for a career in the field you want. You shouldn't be applying to schools because your friends tell you to or your family tells you to. You should really look up the colleges that are good for you. So for example, if you want to go into architecture, don't apply to a school that doesn't have an architecture major because it clearly doesn't make sense. And a good tool to make sure you can decide a good school is College Board. So College Board has a search tool that lets you find all the colleges by their average SAT score or GPA, the majors they have, whether it's a suburban school, an urban, or even a rural university. These are all different sort of features of a school that you might have an interest in. And these are important things you should know about different universities. So for example, let's say you want to work at a law firm while you're in school. Going to a rural university might not be the best choice because there are probably not too many law firms around. But for example, if you do want to be a lawyer in the future and you do want to work at a law firm part-time, going to an urban school, like for example, UC Berkeley might be a good choice. And lastly, talk to your guidance counselor at your high school or community college about what the best options are for you based on different things that can factor into the college admission process. Things like finances, your own personal preferences, and of course your academic scores and GPA, SAT, and whatnot. Now the next really important thing is that for a lot of schools you might want to apply to, they have things called personal statements, and personal statements are essays that you have to put in as part of your application that are about you. So it might be a bit scary because you've probably never written about yourself in much detail before. But the things that are really important to keep in mind are that this is your one shot to relay all your personal experiences and help show who you are, the person you become over high school and community college to the people reading your application. This is your one shot to let them know who you are. So don't, don't try and, use the same essay that your friends wrote or let your parents write it for you, because this is your opportunity to give your application a personal voice. Because after seeing all of your SAT scores, the classes you've taken, the extracurriculars you're in, the admissions counselor will want to see, who you are from your own voice. And it's also a chance to demonstrate your passions, interests, and how you pursued them or developed them throughout high school and community college. And one important note about the UC application, if you're thinking about applying to UC schools, are that they're much shorter now. So I believe it's 350 words per essay now. And that's much shorter than you might be accustomed to, for example, in English class. So these applications should be less about, painting like a really, flowery essay or a personal story, like, a creative writing piece you may have done in English class. They should be more focused on telling the admissions reader why you're the best candidate to go to a certain school. So you shouldn't be writing, a long story about, I moved from Afghanistan at this age, and going to school was really hard for me. They should be more about conveying your message and telling them why you're a good candidate to attend the school. And here are some do's and don'ts for writing your essays. So please do be genuine. Make sure that your voice is being communicated in your essay. A good metaphor that I heard is that if you were to write your essay on a piece of paper and drop it on the floor of your high school or community college, someone who picks it up should be able to tell it's you. So make sure you write about your unique interests, your background, or anything that makes you unique in your application, and be genuine. Convey your voice. Make sure you are being fully represented. Show, not tell. So don't just tell them, I really like math. I love geography. Or I go to Quran class every weekend. Make sure you write a story which tells them, why you love it so much. So maybe when you're writing it, talk about, how you go through algebra homework in 20 minutes because you love it so much, or how much you spend your entire day looking at maps because you're really passionate about geography. So write in a descriptive manner which shows how much you love it, as opposed to just flat out telling them, I'm really interested in geography. And write about something you feel really strongly about. This is your opportunity in your essay to tell them something that's important to you. So don't waste your limited time and space on something that won't show how special you are as a person. Lastly, please do demonstrate growth, learning, and maturity when appropriate. Remember that this is a academic sort of essay. It's not something you can share with your friends or your family. It should be a bit more formal and a bit more appropriate for the people you're addressing. So don't put things like slang in your admissions essay. Use sort of more formal or appropriate language, and that doesn't mean that it has to be very dry sort of essay type piece. It should still convey your own personal voice, but do it in a way that's sort of respectful. And definitely don't be unprofessional, like we mentioned. Don't force a certain narrative. What that means is that you shouldn't be, even if you don't care about math, don't try and say in your application that, I'm a huge fan of math. I'm in the math team because I really love it so much, but it's not true. Definitely don't imitate other people's essays. Now, there might be other people in your class you've read essays from, or you might find an essay online that you really like. Don't imitate it, because people can tell when you're not being genuine. Lastly, don't focus on experiences that happened before high school, because if you're applying to a four-year university, they're only really concerned with what happened in the last 4 or 5 years of high school. If you do anything before that, that sort of gives off the impression that you didn't do anything significant or noteworthy before high school or during your high school years.
So holistically, what the holistic application means is this is something that's typically done by either UCs or the private universities. So if you're applying to the CSUs, for example, they don't take this approach as much as the UCs and the privates do. Essentially what the holistic application is they're looking for students who are more than just students. They're looking for people who are well-rounded, who don't just focus on one specific thing. They don't want the best mathematician in the area who does nothing else, right? They want to see you being a well-rounded person, and that's what holistically reviewing an application means. Is they don't just look at your SAT score. So don't waste all your time making that SAT score as perfect as you can get it to be. They look at things far beyond that. They look at your scores, your grades, they look at your extracurriculars, they look at your community service, they look at your background, who you are as a person. All of those things add up and are a part of your application. Simply putting your scores and your statistics isn't going to cut it with the UCs or the privates. So if there's a reason for something being off, right? Like for example, you're a well-rounded person, but your SAT ended up being lower, or your GPA ended up being lower than what you wanted it to be. What you do then is you make sure you explain that, whether that be because of, for example, a family death that affected you really badly, an illness, you moving high schools, whatever it is, all those things do get looked at, because you can't compare one person with a 3.5 GPA with another person with a 3.5 GPA without understanding how much it took one person to get to that 3.5 versus the other. So that's what holistically reviewing an application means, and that's why you need to make sure that you're not just focusing on the numbers in your application, but also how you're presenting yourself in that application. So how do you apply? Okay, so essentially what you need to look at while you're in high school. So this can be while you're a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, and especially as a senior, because as a senior you need to make sure all of this is like complete. We're going to go into more details on almost all of these later on, but essentially the first and most important thing is your A through G requirements. So this is the number of years of English you took, the number of years of math you took, all those different requirements. They're all if you're in high school, you should know about all of these, but essentially you need to make sure you have these requirements completed. Otherwise, you're not eligible to be accepted into any university, whether that be CSU, UC, or privates. So the important thing here is to understand that even if you're a senior right now, you need to make sure you sit down and make sure you check off that you have all of the requirements done. A lot of people come in with the expectation that they have them done by taking the classes they took, but because they missed something, they waived something, sometimes that requirement's not fulfilled. And even if you're a senior right now, you still have time to fulfill it next semester, so make sure you keep an eye on that. Even if you don't have something completed, if you can tell on your application that you will complete it next semester or whenever it is, they will not penalize you for that. In addition to that, you need to obviously focus on the standardized testing, so that's the SATs or the ACTs. Although many universities are starting to make the SATs and ACTs optional rather than required on the applications, it is still the preeminent way for them to look at you holistically, because that's a standardized test that people take, whether they be in California or in Maine. Regardless of where they are, everyone takes it. So it's a way for them to compare you with everyone else. So make sure you take that seriously. If you are a junior or younger than a junior, in 11th grade, you have the option of taking the PSAT, and if you take that, you are eligible for the National Merit Scholarship, which is one of the most prestigious scholarships you can get for merit basis. So it's a pretty important test to take, but keep in mind, PSATs, the P in PSAT stands for pre, which means they are not the SATs or the ACTs, so make sure you don't take them, or you don't think of them as the actual SAT, they're just a precursor. Your GPAs is super important. As Zaid mentioned, obviously depending on your GPA and your SATs, that's how you factor in what school you want to apply to. But keep in mind, often people underestimate how high their GPA is. If you have a 3.4 GPA and that's unweighted, so that doesn't factor in your AP scores or your honor points from dual enrollment credits at the local community college or whatever it is, you need to make sure you factor those in before you realize what your GPA is. UCs will do that for you anyways, but that's just something to keep in mind. Extracurriculars are super important. They just don't want a robot as a student at the university. They want people who are well-rounded, people who are rooted in community, people who do things, community service, whether that be cleaning up the mosque, whether that be going out every other weekend to clean up a park, whether that be volunteering at a blood bank, whatever it is. All of those things do add character to you, and that's important to highlight in your applications. And if you're in high school, you need to make sure you have something to highlight once it's time for you to apply. So if you're not a senior right now, make sure you take proactive steps in actually creating that. Don't do it for the resume, but for building that character, because it's very obvious to see people who does extracurriculars for a resume versus who does it because they're actually passionate about the things they do. And those things don't have to be like, oh, I'm doing community service. If you have to take care of your little brother or your little sister while your parents are at work, that counts as an extracurricular because that's something you're doing outside of your class time, right? That's something that takes away time from you. If you have to take care of a family member who's ill, that counts as an extracurricular. If you have to babysit, whatever it is. These three we'll go into more in depth later, so I won't go into them, but those are things you need to start thinking of before your senior year. You can think of them during your senior year as well, but you need to make sure you have a game plan going into your senior year. Okay, so this is essentially the list of what we're going to cover today in terms of what you can apply to. There is the CSU system, there's the California Community College system, there's the private system, obviously, which encompasses everything that's not a public university, and then there's the UC system, which is what we're representing from Berkeley. Perfect. So transfers. This is important for anyone to know, just this information, even if you're not currently at a community college, because a lot of students do find it the most useful to actually go to a community college before they go on to any four-year university. So just some misconceptions to clear up, first of all, about community colleges, because a lot of people have these preconceived notions of what it means to go to community college, and they don't realize the importance and the brilliance of community college. So let's go into it. A lot of people have this misconception that community college students are failures because they're not going to a CSU or a UC straight off the bat, right? So for example, they think the students going to Delta College or wherever, they think that somehow they're lacking because they're going to that community college. That's certainly and absolutely not true. Community colleges are way more accessible and are way more successful in terms of the students they produce than UCs and CSUs. There are 114 community colleges in California, and each of them provides super interesting and super valuable resources for anyone. You can go to Manteca. Manteca has a community college. There's Delta College. There's one in Sacramento City College. There's many colleges that are localized to the community. The importance of it is it's accessible to you without you having to go far off to a UC or a CSU. Another misconception people often have is once you enter a community college, you're stuck in that community college and that you won't have a chance to get your classes or that it'll take you forever to transfer. We all hear stories of like, oh, it took me 10 years to transfer. That's not a negative to community colleges, that's a positive. It means you can work at your own pace. A lot of community college students have other things going on in life. They are working jobs, they're taking care of families, whatever it is, right? The important part here is to understand that the fact that you can take it as slow or as fast as you want in community colleges is something that should be seen as a resource for you, not as a detriment for going to community colleges. Also, community college classes, people often think are way too easy and will not prepare you for 4 years. That's absolutely not true. Almost all the community college professors you'll have in your time at community college are super qualified. Just for example, in San Joaquin Delta College, most of the STEM professors, for example, have amazing degrees. They're amazing credentials. For example, Dr. McRae, she's an amazing biology professor. So it's really important to make sure you utilize the community college system if that's what you need to utilize, because it is sometimes the best option for students. So applying to community colleges. So once the applications for community colleges are the easiest and they're the most accessible. So what you do is you go to cccapply.org, or you can just like Google community college application. This application serves for all the community colleges. So you open the application and then you select which community college you want to go to. For this area, the one that's the most accessible is San Joaquin Delta College. It's online, there's an online orientation, and it's super accessible. Again, this accessibility should be seen as a major positive. There's no requirement to enroll. You don't need to worry about having an SAT or an ACT minimum or a GPA minimum. colleges are designed to be accessible for you. There's also lots of some specialized and vocational programs. For example, San Joaquin Delta College right here has the only electron microscopy program in the whole US in terms of community colleges. So you have a lot of resources. There's nursing programs, there's other vocational jobs or vocational programs. So it's important to look into what you want to do and then see if community colleges provide those resources for you. I think we skipped you. Perfect. So again, benefits. It's very low cost. Often, actually, yeah, recently, the California government passed a bill that makes the first 2 years of community college free for everyone. So that means it's $0. That's something very rare that you see in higher education. It costs you nothing, and it is super easy to transfer to a UC or a CSU depending on what you want to do. So there's this program called TAG, the Transfer Admission Guarantee Program, and what it essentially does is when you're at a community college, you go to your counselor and you tell them you want to do TAG to XUC. This is for the UCs other than UC San Diego, UC Los Angeles, and UC Berkeley. So for any of the other UCs, whether that be UC Merced, UC Santa Cruz, UC Santa Barbara, or the other three, you have the option of opting into this program where they'll give you a certain amount of requirements. If you fulfill those requirements, you will be guaranteed an admission into that UC. That's super amazing. It's super resourceful for you to take advantage of. Also, community colleges in general are a lot more accommodating for you, so it's a lot better of an environment. There's smaller classes. You won't have any classes with 600 people in one lecture hall. That means your professors are accessible because they have smaller classes, and there's a lot more of a diverse population in community colleges. You'll actually get to see people like you in community colleges, which is not often something you can experience at a UC or a CSU, depending on which one you go to. Also, community colleges will take your AP credits in order to fast track the time it takes you to finish your IGETC or your essentially the curriculum with which you transferred. So finally, as I mentioned before, it's very flexible, whether that be with work, whether that be with home environment, whatever it is, community colleges are accommodating. They're largely comprised of students who are trying to either do a vocational program or trying to transfer. So it is very like-minded peers. So there are some downsides. The main one I will highlight is there is discrimination faced by transfers. Essentially what happens is when you transfer from a community college to a UC or a CSU, you're usually capped at 2 years in order to finish your degree. That's super important and super relevant to know, because what that means is you will need to finish everything you have left in those 2 years. That includes your extracurriculars, that includes anything else you want to do besides your classes. So you do need to make sure if you're going to transfer to a UC or a CSU, you go in with a plan. What that means is make sure you take advantage of the resources you have. This is not so much a downside as it is a reality of just being a transfer. It is a lot more difficult to acclimate sometimes, just because a lot of colleges design the student experience for 4 years, right? So for example, if you want to get involved with student government or any club leadership, it is harder to get into club leadership just because you are new, but you only have 2 more years, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So while you're at a community college, if you're deciding to go to community college, what you need to do is to make a 2-year plan that will help you transfer as soon as possible. So what this means is you can use this amazing website called assist.org, and what it does is it will tell you what community college courses at your local community college, for example Delta, are directly transferable to each UC. So this is dependent on whatever 4-year university you go to, whether that be a CSU or a UC. You need to look into your majors, into your schools, and then find the pathway you want, right? And then once you do that, then you need to just finish that and make sure you stay on track to transfer. The biggest problem people have with transferring is not so much the difficulty, but rather their commitment to stay on track. Because obviously you have other things going on in life, and you need to make sure you have a clear goal for what you want to do. You can get an associate's degree or a 2-year degree from your community college, but that is not necessary. You do not need a 2-year degree in order to transfer to a 4-year university. Okay, so essentially there's a lot of the same things going on when you're applying as a transfer. The main difference is there's one different question on the personal insight question, which we'll go into later, that talks about the transfer experience rather than whatever it was for the freshman applicants. You also do not need an SAT score, so that's another weight that's lifted off your shoulder, because that's just something, that's one less obstacle. And then you also do not need to put in your high school activities unless it's something super, super important. If you're in a club in high school and you're the president of that, unless it's super relevant, you do not need to put it in there, because what they want to see is that in those 2 years you were at community college, to see what you have done in that time, right? Whether that be when you were working, you were involved with this nonprofit, or whatever it was. You also need to make sure you mention any circumstances that are going on in your life so that they can see who you are, and that will definitely be a positive for you. So whether that be, for example, family problems, whether that be financially or otherwise, you need to mention those so that they can understand how tough it was for you to get to that position you got into. Because without them seeing how tough it was for you to get where you are, they won't be able to see like how much more work you put in than another person that's at the same position as you. All right, I think that's good. Perfect, so CSUs.
Okay, so CSU stands for California State Universities. So what are CSUs? CSUs are the biggest university system in the entire world. So as you can see, they're spread out all over California. There are 23 different campuses in California. Some that you may have heard of are San Jose State, Sac State, Cal Poly, CSU Long Beach, there's SF State, there's Fresno State, there's a lot of CSUs in California. So the application opened up on October 1st, so, and they're going to close on November 30th, so you can submit any time between then. That's considered the priority application. There are some CSUs who will have their application open afterwards, but if you apply within that time frame, you are considered a priority applicant. The application is way more straightforward than a UC. There aren't any mandatory essays, which is always the hardest part of any college application, unless you want to do EOP, which I recommend everybody do EOP. I'll get into that later. So what do you have to do? So there are personal information. This is all just like info about who you are, your family, where you come from. That's pretty easy, but the real hardest part of the application is the academic history. So you're going to have to put in all the high school and college work that or community college work that you've done throughout your high school career. You're going to have to do your transcript entry. This means putting in all the classes you've taken and all the grades that you got. So putting in whether you got an A or a B or A minus or a B plus, and that's all really important work. That's all really important because once you do send in your transcript later on, it's really critical that you have the same information. You're going to have to match the courses you take with the A through G requirement. So if you took an English class, it's obviously going to fulfill the English requirement. If you took a stats class, that's going to fulfill the math requirement. And you're going to have to put in your ACT and SAT score. So if you're applying as a freshman applicant, you are going to have to put in that score. There's also the EOP. So EOP is a program for minority or underserved communities. And so what they do is they support students once they get to college. So if a lot of students from those backgrounds get to college and they need more help than students from the majority population. And so this program is really helpful. If I'm a part of EOP at Berkeley, and they're just really helpful in getting you acclimated to college life. And so if you do want to be in that program, you are going to have to submit some essays. They aren't that bad. I think there's 2 or 3. Yeah. And you are going to have to put in some letters of recommendations, which we'll touch on later. And the fee for each CSU is $55, but there is a fee waiver that you can apply to, and you'll get if you are considered low income. Yeah, so the eligibility index. So admissions is generally determined by an eligibility index, which means that if you have a higher GPA, the lower your ACT or SAT score is going to have to be. Or let's say you have a lower GPA, that means the higher that your ACT or SAT score is going to have to be. So let's say you have a 3.0, you're going to need a lower ACT to get in. Or if you have a higher GPA, wait, is that right? If you have a higher GPA, the lower your score needs to be. Or if you have like a higher score, that means the lower your GPA. You see, I feel like I just said the same thing twice. Whatever. Yeah, but they're going to determine if you can get in based on that. So you want to make sure that you are eligible to get into a CSU by searching up the eligibility index. I would write that down. Pretty important.
Alright, so the Common App is a different type of application. So you've seen the CSU, we're going to talk about UC. The Common App is a different application that's mainly for private colleges and also some public schools as well. But so the type of colleges you'd be applying to if you use the Common App is places like Stanford or USC or University of the Pacific, and other schools you may have heard of like Harvard or Boston College. So these are like the different type of things you have to fill out for the Common App. So the thing with Common App is that there's the Common App, which you send to every single school you apply to, and then there are separate college-specific questions that individual colleges you apply to are going to ask you. So for the Common App, they're going to ask you to fill out your personal profile. So that includes your contacts, maybe your parents or your guardian, the demographics. So they're going to ask you to fill out some information about who you are, what you look like, and geography, like where you went to school, where you were born, where you grew up. And then family household section, we'll talk about your parents, any siblings. These are like different things colleges look at to make sure you are given like the same opportunities as other students. Education, the high schools you attended or community college. Testing, your different SAT scores, ACT scores, AP scores, if you take that. Subject test as well. Activities, now this is a really important section because they allow you to put in up to 10 different extracurricular activities that you've been involved in. Now you don't have to use all 10 different slots, but it's good to show that you've been involved throughout high school or community college in different things. And the important thing here is you put in quality over quantity. So if someone puts in 10 different activities, but they did very little in each of them, it doesn't make as much of an impact as someone who say fills out 3 or 4, but they've done a lot for that community or activity. So if you're the president of 2 clubs, that's a lot better than if you're just a normal member in 3, where you just go to the meetings every month for 4 different activities. And then there's the writing. So the Common App essay is like a pretty big essay. It has 650 words max. And we're going to go into different prompts, but this is like a really important place where you can talk about yourself. And there's also an additional information section for you to explain any different circumstances you had growing up or in high school or community college. The last part is the courses and grades. And this is your self-reported transcript that some colleges make you fill out. For example, if you're applying to USC, they want you to fill out all the courses you've taken, similar to the A through G section of the CSU application. And then you have your college-specific questions. So every single college you add, there's like an interface in the Common App that lets you pick all the colleges you want to apply to. Now, there are college-specific questions for each of the colleges you want to apply to, which ask different information that they're asking for. So there may be more essays depending on the college. They might be asking really specific information that only that college will ask for. But it's going to be different for each college. And we're going to go through the different prompts that the Common App has. So for this year, the first one is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful that they believe their application will be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. This is a really great prompt. This is the one I wrote about because I had the opportunity to talk about my family, my background, my culture, because I felt that was really important to me. And like it says, my application would have been incomplete without it. So this is an opportunity to show something that you're really passionate about to the admissions team. And what you'll notice is that this prompt is very sort of open-ended, generic. You could write about anything that falls under that category. The second one is the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? Now this Common App prompt is all about growth, how you were faced with a problem and how you resolved it. Now that second point is more important, how you fixed or overcame it. Because you could have gone through a lot of bad things in your life, and some people can write an essay that's very sad all the way through, and no one likes reading something like that. This essay is an opportunity for you to show how you evolved or changed from experiences. So, let's say you went through a bad thing that affected your grades, maybe affected how you did high school or community college. But the important part is the second point, which is how you change from it, how you develop from it, how you grew from it. And it's important, like a good rule is that maybe the first half or the first third can be about the problem and experience, but the second half or last 2/3 should be more about how you decided you were going to overcome this problem and what your solution was. Because this type of essay shows growth and how you overcame a barrier in your life. Third one is about reflecting on a time when you questioned or challenged your belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? Now this one is more about thinking or your own personal beliefs. If you're a English major or philosophy major, this essay could be an opportunity for you to show the admissions team your critical thinking skills. So this can be about, for example, questioning something you're taught in school, and you decide to go off and research it yourself, and you came to a different conclusion. It's a very open-ended one. It's also a bit harder because it could be controversial or it could be not as good. Number 4 is describe a problem you've solved or a problem you'd like to solve. It can be an intellectual challenge, a research query, an ethical dilemma, anything that has a personal importance no matter the scale. Explain its significance to you and what steps you took or could be taken to identify a solution. If you're a problem solver, this is a really good essay to write about. And a general tip for all of these prompts is that when you look at them, if there's any which you really feel like you could write a lot about and show who you are, then you should pick that one. So for this one, let's say you're really interested in science or in healthcare, and you came across a problem, maybe with, for example, a water filtration system, at home, and you're really passionate about solving that problem. This could be a good opportunity for you to show off your research skills. Number 5, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself and others. This one's pretty straightforward and similar to the previous ones. It's just about writing well about something that made you change your behavior or your thinking. Number 6, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? Who or what do you turn to when you want to learn more? This one is about anything you're super passionate about. So people have written good essays about even things like math, which may sound dry, but to some people they're really important. And it's important with this type of essay to show why you like it and why you spend so much time on it, as opposed to just saying I like math, I'm really interested in it, I lose all track of time when I do math. You need to write something that's very descriptive. It should show the person who's reading it why you like it so much. Number 7, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written or one that responds to a different problem or one of your design. This is straightforward. It's anything you want to write about. This can even be like an essay you've written before that you want to reuse. This is basically an empty text box for you to write whatever you want. And for all these prompts, when you read through them, if there's one that you feel you really can write about, you should pick that one. Now we're going to move on to UC personal insight questions. With the UC app, you can pick 4 of 8. These are the first 2 prompts. And you have to remember you can write a maximum of 350 words. So this isn't going to be like your common app prompt. This should be shorter and more direct. And you should be telling the admissions team why you're a good candidate for getting into this college. So the first one says, describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So let's say you're the head of a certain club in high school or community college. This is a good experience for you to tell them what you did, what was a leadership role you took on, and how you worked with others to achieve some sort of goal. Number 2, every person has a creative side and can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. If you do any sort of creative endeavor like art or painting, drawing, or even things like architecture, this is a good way to express, how creatively you think. Number 3, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? If there's any one thing you're really good at, this is the opportunity for you to make it shine. It's pretty straightforward, and once again with the UC app, you should focus on making it long and flowy. Just tell them what your talent is and why it's so important to you. Number 4, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? Now, this is the same one. Yeah. Describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has the challenge affected your academic achievement? Similar to the common app prompt, this one is about challenge again. This is a lot shorter, so once again, keep in mind that you should spend half the time talking about the challenge, with the second half talking about how you overcame that challenge. Number 6, describe the most significant challenge you have faced. And number 7, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? Once again, if you've done anything in your community, maybe you volunteer for this masjid, maybe you are in some club in high school that's making a lot of change. This is the opportunity to tell them how you help your community at school, at home, at the masjid, and you focus on how you help enrich other people's lives. Number 8, beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions to the UC system? Same thing as a common app, this is the opportunity to put in anything you feel hasn't been covered in the other prompts, anything that's important to you.
So now we're getting to letters of recommendation. Now, not all of the colleges you apply to are going to ask for letters of recommendation. The common apps will, some CSUs, well, if you apply to the ELP app, the program, then you're going to have to submit some letters of recommendation. And I know that Berkeley has started to ask some students for letters of rec. I know I got asked for letters of rec. And if you do have to do that, this is how it works. So they're going to ask you to put in the email address of whoever you want to write your application, and they're going to send them an email where they can sign up through their portal and then submit their letter over there. You aren't going to be able to see it just because that creates like an issue with like bias in the letter of rec. Some tips when you're asking for letters of rec. It's perfectly fine to ask your recommender to highlight some parts of your application. Let's say that you want to talk about how you were a student athlete and you were able to balance like your work, your student life and your athletic life. It's okay to tell your teacher like, hey, can you talk about how even if I had to miss some classes, I still was back on track. It's perfectly fine to direct your letter of rec. In fact, it's recommended that you do that so that it highlights your application even more. The purpose of a letter of rec is to help admissions get a better picture of the type of person that you are. So you can talk about yourself for as much as you want, but having that outside person talk about you is going to really improve your application. So now typically recommendations are things that are already in your application. So you don't want the writer of your letter of rec to bring up something that's completely not even in your application. You want them to keep highlighting that one thing that you want to stress to the admissions counselor. You want to include a resume when you want someone to write your letter of rec. My school called it brag sheets, and so what that is, like, you basically just bragged about all the things that we did in high school. So you just wrote every single thing that you did, and you give this to the person that's writing your letter so that they can choose one of the things and highlight that in your application. The letter is meant to provide an insight on you from a third person's perspective. Like I said, it's really good to have that other person kind of bragging for you and convincing the admissions officer to let you in. You're going to want to choose someone that really knows who you are. Don't choose a teacher that doesn't like you. Choose a teacher that likes you to write your letter of rec. Choose someone who knows who you are. That could be a boss. That could be a mentor in your community. Just choose someone that knows who you are. Yeah, make sure you don't read it. That's a really big issue if you read it. You aren't going to want to read the application just because that could corrupt the integrity of your application, of your letter. And make sure that you send your recommendations to your counselor and to include them in their applications. That's just going to help them focus your letter right.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about financial aid, which is very key and important for like the college experience. So college is very expensive. I know firsthand, and that's why financial aid is very important, and it helps kind of alleviate that burden from your family for paying for your college. So there's a lot of financial aid programs. So there's a federal aid, which is FAFSA. We're going to talk about that in depth. There's a California state aid called Cal Grant. Dreamers, which is the California Dream Act application. And then for privates, so through the Common App, there's the institutional aid, which is the CSS profile, which I'm going to also talk about in depth. And there's also outside scholarships that you can apply to, usually spring semester of the high school senior year. Can go on to the next slide. Okay, so before I go on depth with the FAFSA and the other thing, I'm going to talk about some conceptions about financial aid. So some people say that there's not enough money to go around for everyone to apply for financial aid, and that's not true. There's around $2.6 billion in financial aid that went unclaimed in 2017-2018 due to students not filling out the FAFSA. So I highly recommend you guys all apply. Another misconception is that federal student aid is free money. That's not true. So some of it is free money, but then there's also low interest loans where you can apply for loans. And then there's also work study. So I'm currently doing work study, and it's labor, so it's technically not free money, but you do get a good amount. Another misconception is that my parents are too rich for me to get into any financial aid, and that's not true. Like if you do apply for like FAFSA, even though you probably won't get as much money as someone who's low income, you still get like a little bit, and that helps alleviate the burden for sure. Another thing is it's super hard to fill out the FAFSA, and this is also not true. It's really, really easy. They make it easy for a reason, and it takes usually around 30 minutes. And then also if your parents filled out their taxes early on, it's kind of like an automatic process where you, if you upload the income tax, then it automatically fills out the whole entire application for you. Another misconception is that private colleges are too expensive for me to afford. This is also not true. So many private universities are actually cheaper than public universities, and the reason for that is because they have their own kind of financial aid that I'll talk about later. So the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So after you fill it out, it determines your expected family contribution, EFC. So this is basically how much you can afford to pay per year based on the information you filled in. And the government and colleges look at your EFC and determine your financial aid award. And then the CSS profile. So this is for private colleges. So this is it's more in depth and there's a longer process than the FAFSA, and it can potentially give you bigger financial aid reward than public universities. And it costs $25 to apply to one school and $16 more for each additional. And there's also free waivers available when you apply. And then outside scholarships, so I highly recommend you guys do this. So even though there's like federal aid and state aid, there's a lot of scholarships from all types of organizations. And yeah, you can go on to scholarships.com. There's also the Islamic Scholarship Fund. So there's a lot of resources out there. You just have to take advantage, and you'll definitely alleviate the expenses of your college.
Okay, so with that, we're essentially done with the pre-created material for the presentation. Now what it is for at least 20 minutes, we're just going to take questions. So essentially whatever you have, whatever you're confused about, you can bring up anything. Otherwise, there's other stuff we can talk about to continue. Do you guys have any questions? Nothing? Yes?
What matters more, ACT or SAT or GPA?
One of you want to answer that? Okay, so the ACT, SAT, and the GPA, especially for example, CSU, they're very straightforward. What you get and what you get for each point of it, you just add into your eligibility index and it tells you like what you got, right? It's like, oh, this is your, you qualify. Essentially, it's pretty easy to qualify. For UCs and privates, it is a bit more difficult to figure out what's more important. What I will say is the GPA is more substantive because it shows, one, your progress through 4 years, right? Then also, it's super important because it's dependent on your high school. So that's one thing you need to know about the GPA. SAT, ACT are standardized. What you're taking in Stockton, California, or Lodi, California, is the same thing they're taking in Miami, Florida. Like, it's the same test. So what that helps them do is figure out like, oh, regardless of like background, regardless of where they came from, how do they measure against other people, right? So that's super important, but then the GPA I would say is more important marginally, not by much, because it highlights specifically like they'll look at, oh, this is the average GPA we get from this community, and this is the average GPA we get from his or her high school. So they get to see like how you compare with people like you, not against people whose parents may be like able to afford like amazing private tutors. Yeah.
She was talking about an inverse relationship between like SAT, ACT scores, and GPA.
Yeah, the eligibility.
Yeah.
I can go after that. So basically, I can click on it too.
Yeah. I'll pull it up while you talk.
Okay. Where is this? Okay. So basically, it is an inverse relationship. So if, let's say you have like a 3.0, then when you take the ACT, it essentially doesn't matter what you get. Because if the requirement for a CSU is a 2.0, right? So if you have a 2.0 or higher, or a 3.0, then it essentially doesn't matter. You can like literally bomb the test and it won't matter. But this is how you do it. So you're going to want to view all these things, click on everything you got, and then you want to put in your GPA. Let's say you got a 3.0. It's going to show you the minimum ACT or SAT that you would have to get in order to be eligible, and you can get any ACT to get in if you have a 3.0. Let's say you have a 2.0. Yeah, so you're going to have to get an ACT score of 30 or an SAT score of 1300 to get in. So if you have a higher GPA, you can have whatever like score you. Oh, this is basically the chart. So if you can find your GPA, this is what SAT score correlates with that. So there's a whole chart, there's a whole like website that you can look at.
And importantly, this is specifically for the CSU.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just CSU. So the UCs have a minimum of 3.0, right, to get in, and you can have any ACT for that.
So just to add more onto that, so for the UCs and the privates, again, holistic approach means that they look at more than just your SAT, ACT, and your GPA. They'll look at your extracurriculars. They'll look at, did they know English when they first started? Like, did they know English until they were 10 years old? Did they grow up knowing English? Did they grow up in the U.S.? Did they immigrate here? All those different things, right? Like, they'll look at all of that, plus things like your extracurriculars. Oh, do they play a sport? Do they do they work part-time? Do they do like science or math competitions? Whatever it is, right? All of that gets factored in much more in a holistic application versus the CSU application.
So is it still good to apply for a college that, even though your stats are like measured with it, are you fine to still apply for it, even though you might not reach? Yeah.
Yeah, so totally. For instance, for me personally, I had like a decent GPA, but my SAT score was very low compared to like the average for UC Berkeley. But because it was a holistic approach, the way that they looked at my application, I did a lot of like extracurricular activities. My personal statement was very, I guess, personal and like unique. So that would be considered like a reach school, and then I got in, so it's definitely possible for other people to get in as well.
I think it's much more important to understand, like, if you think you are personally a good fit for that, then even if your SAT score and your GPA doesn't fit, There's literally like nothing other than potentially the application fee if you don't qualify for a fee waiver. There's nothing other than that stopping you from applying, because again, you won't most people don't have the opportunity of like changing colleges after they choose like, oh, I'm going to this four-year university. So you might as well apply to see how it turns out, especially if like it's not completely outlandish. If you have a 2.0 and a 1000 SAT, then perhaps UC Berkeley probably is not the right answer, unless you have some super specific like special circumstance which can actually explain why you have a 2.0 instead of a 3.5, for example.
And for the ACT and ACT, how many times would you guys prefer like to retake it? Because is it bad if you keep on retaking it, or is it good?
So for the UC, you have to send every single SAT or ACT you've ever taken. So if they see someone who's taken like 10 times, like obviously if you're gonna take it enough times, that's enough practice, you're gonna get a good score. A good number I would say is like no more than 3 or 4 maybe, because not everyone can afford to take it multiple times. So if you're just taking it every month, then you're gonna end up better than most people anyway. So 3 is maybe like an upper limit. Try and do your best and take a lot of like practice tests so you can like understand what score you're getting. There's a good resource called Khan Academy, and on there like they do a really good job of you can take practice tests at the start, and then they pull all the questions you didn't do as well, and they make you like repeat that until you do better at that. So just that will give you a good like indication of how well you're doing. So if you use that tool like consistently, maybe you only take it once or twice until you get a score you're satisfied with. Because if they see someone who's taking like a lot of times, then they're gonna be more like he got a lot of opportunities to take it.
One thing people often struggle with understanding is that people don't look at the score as just, oh, he got a 1500, he's this good. Usually SAT and ACT scores should be looked at in terms of the range. So like a 1480 versus a 1500 is not really going to be seen any differently. So if you take like, for example, if you have a 1440 and you take the SAT 3 times and you improve that to 1480, that doesn't show them improvement, that shows them that you are super, super insecure about the 1440 and like want to have that marginal improvement, versus instead of spending those hours just spending on the SAT, spend that in any competitions that are going on through your clubs, spend that in community service, all those different things. That adds a lot more to it. Like obviously if you have a 1200 and you want to get to a 1400 and you think you can get there, you should take it again, but you shouldn't be taking it for like improvements of 10. No one looks at a 1600 differently than they look at a 1590. Like that's just one fluke question, right? Like anyone could miss that on any day.
My last question. So do they still look at PSATs and then they compare it to your SAT? Because over the years we've taken like a lot of PSATs through freshman, sophomore, and junior year, especially for the national merit. But do they look at that and then compare it to their actual SAT?
Yeah, so in all the applications there's a testing section, so if you want to put it in, you can. Because it's up to you with the PSAT, because they don't send it to schools like automatically with the SAT. So when you take the SAT, you can tell them, as soon as I take it, send it to these schools which I'm applying to. With the PSAT, you'll just put in your application and they'll take your word for it. It doesn't go to your school. So you can put it in. I don't think they would compare between the PSAT and SAT. If you do well in the PSAT, that's just like a good thing you got going for you.
One thing, since you mentioned putting it into your application and you won't send it, so like you won't need to send proof. One thing that you should be super cognizant of is not putting in something that's wrong, whether intentional or unintentional on your application. There's been a lot of people who like actually just make a mistake in putting a B versus a B minus, right? When they're putting in their transcript. If your school takes B and B minus seriously, then you need to make sure you specify that. Because if you don't, even if it's unintentional, when they get your transcript, so say they accept it without looking at your final transcript, right? Accept you without looking at your transcript. If they then see that you lied even about a plus or a minus, they have the full authority to just say, sorry, you're rescinded, you're not accepted. They'll take away your acceptance, right? So that's super important because one, don't intentionally lie, but two, don't also rely on online portals like Aries to put in your grades. what you should be doing is going into your school office, asking for your unofficial transcript, because the only difference between an unofficial and an official transcript is that the official one is sealed and the unofficial one is not. So it's the same thing you'll be sending them. So ask them for that unofficial transcript and then put in the grades based on the unofficial transcript, not what you see on Aries, because Aries might have a mistake and you don't want to end up having that problem later on. Any other question?
No, my last question. So for putting your on your or like on your resume, for putting for so if you do something for like a freshman through junior year and then you stop and then senior year you do something else, doesn't that look bad on your or like on your stats? Because like colleges don't want to see you like stop at something that you've been doing.
Well, like, it depends on the reason that you stop. Because, like, I know that I explained that, like, I couldn't do anything junior year because, I had to, like, literally when I went home, the first thing I had to do was, like, clean and cook, and then I could do my homework. So, like, there's a lot of things that I was like, yeah, I couldn't really do anything my junior year because I had a lot of, like, so it's really important to explain. So if you have the opportunity to explain why there's a gap, you need to explain why.
Yeah, I guess just one other thing to add on for like continuancy of your extracurriculars, it is important to have like consistent things. So like I know, for example, here in Lower South, Key Club's a big thing. Key Club is great and it's amazing, but you should not count on your community service as like going to clean up the park here one day and that's it, and then 3 months later cleaning up the park here or something like that, right? What people prefer a lot more when admission officers look at your applications is they prefer seeing, oh, this person has been volunteering at the library for the last like 2 years, once a month or once a week, right? That shows consistency, because what that shows is that you're actually creating some impact on your local community. You are a part of like uplifting that community versus a one-off event, if that makes any sense. Any other questions? Feel free. This is a moment to ask. You don't have another last question?
I do, but let's continue.
Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. It looked like you were raising your hand. You should? I'm kidding. Okay. If that's that, then I think we're done with the Q&A section. Do you guys, now what we can do is, what we usually do is we break out from presentation, and then you can like just one-on-one to any of us ask questions if you're too shy to ask in a group setting.
If you have any essays as well, we can take a look at those.
So with that, I think we're done with the presentation. So Jazakallah khair for showing up, and for anyone watching, I think we're good, right? Thanks.
Thank you guys.
The thing is still on, so you need my phone. I know, but it catches up pretty quickly. Does anyone know where Imam Yasser is? Oh, I can message him. Okay, but if anyone has one-on-one questions, you need to decide all of the answer questions.
I two of my insight questions like brutalized by my librarian, so I'll get back to you when I finish.
I mean, if you have them, it's always good to just like pull them up. You don't mind looking at them. Are you here for the application? Yeah. Perfect. One of you two were? These are all do you afford the $800 that I have here? Needs but that's actually the point back at. I get it. You guys have any questions? Specifics? They don't ever sleep for college. All the other kids. I think I
But
thought
that
that
one,
was
that one is kind of great.
dude, one of my that's fine. One of my responsibilities is with your implementation of that. That's it. There's not half of the population of that. You know, I feel like you are both in sophomore year. No, sophomore is actually the perfect time to actually start thinking about college. Cause like if you do it any later, and like if you miss anything on your application or like you miss anything in preparation, then you won't like benefit as much. We're good with that, yeah. So we're just straight. Yeah, we're trying to figure out. Anything else? Well, no, because he's talking about like getting leadership positions is based on like elections and how popular. Yeah.
Well, would you mind if you talk about your class on getting more teachers to leadership?
Like
ACT, SAT.
Luca.
I mean, SA,